Hi, everyone. Oh, I see a few people have joined the chat. So I'm Ismée Williams, author of This Train is Being Held Behind Me. And I am so happy to be here today with my fabulous agent, Jim McCarthy.
Hi everyone, I'm Jim. I'm an agent and VP at Dystel Goderich Bourret, and I've been there for 20 years now, heading towards 21 this year.
That is so crazy.
Yeah.
And it's funny, right before this, I was looking up my notes from the 2011 SCBWI conference, which was when I first met you because you did a panel and I signed up. I knew literally nothing. I just had a manuscript and I had my notes. And in my notes, I wrote down who you were and you said that you had been there for 11 years, which
Oh, yeah.
that
Yeah,
makes
I
sense. That's
started as an
math.
intern in the 90s, and here I am.
Gosh. Time does fly. So I can see everybody's saying, hello, fellow writers. This is so great. Also, so I have some polls set up if you want to tell us about yourself, but also in the chat, just give a shout out where you're tuning in from, because that's always kind of cool to see where people are. So we're all gathered today because we love books and we love writing. And we wanted to ask Jim a little bit about, being an agent. How does one get an agent? What is an agent? Why are agents so fabulous? Excuse me, and I have an outline made, but we'd also love to take questions from you guys, but we'll start it off. So Jim, why don't you start by telling everybody exactly what an agent does and
Sure.
why it's great for writers to have one?
Yeah, I think an agent's main job is to act as an author's advocate throughout the entire publication process. We look for new writers just starting out and sign you on, work with authors editorially, and then take projects out and try to get the best deal possible. What the part that I think most people don't know about is that after that, we're still there every step of the way. We're monitoring your royalty statements to see what your sales were. We're working with you on deciding what the next book might be. We're plotting whether to keep you with your current editor, whether it's time to move on to a new publisher. So it starts out as a very sort of straightforward sales job and then transitions into almost more of a coaching position where we try to uh, guide authors to their best possible career, and problem solve and answer questions along the way.
Yes, you have been an excellent coach for me. I will attest to that.
Thank you.
Um, so all right, so everybody's clear what an agent does, and I bet a lot of you are here also just to, connect and do some other fun things in this day and age where most of us are cooped up inside at least. But I bet some of you are probably querying. So, oh, I have to start the polls. I was like, how come nobody's answered my polls? I have to publish them. Oh, maybe I can only do one at a time. All right, so I'm publishing some polls, and I'm asking, what age do you write for? So this is interesting. I don't know if everybody else can see this, but the bars are moving as everybody is answering. So it seems that the majority are young adults, and with about 64%, middle grade 20%, 9% picture book, 5% early reader chapter book. Very cool. All right, thank
Great.
you guys. And let's see. All right. So, but here's a question, Jen. So does every single author always have an agent, or are there ever cases where authors don't have agents?
Sure. There are some publishers, usually pretty small ones, who accept direct submissions from authors. Some publishers will have contests where the winner of the contest gets a contract with that publisher. Um, I would say that if you're working with a traditional publisher, it's probably in your best interest to have an agent. I've seen people coming out of those situations where um, where publishers have offered contracts to unagented authors who just don't know what to ask for and what to look for in a contract, and they've gotten really terrible terms. So if you're going the traditional route, I do think it's pretty essential to have an agent. That said, a lot more people are independently publishing, and if you're doing that and you're able to do it successfully, you don't necessarily need to have an agent. Having one might help you with foreign rights or film rights, but it's not essential. And increasingly, I would say that agents are open to working with authors who are sort of a hybrid, who might be doing some stuff traditionally, some stuff independently, um, and uh, uh, and sort of helping you find the best way forward. I'm just noticing a couple questions where people are asking if this is for children's only. I do also represent adult fiction. I
Yeah,
think
that was my bad. I forgot to add that to the poll. Sorry, guys.
not a problem. I do. I'm probably best known for my young adult and middle grade lists, but I represent everything from early reader up through adult fiction and nonfiction. So hopefully we'll be able to answer questions for anyone here.
Yes. So again, my bad. Sorry,
And
guys.
no problem. And I would actually add that that in terms of the question of whether or not you need to have an agent, uh, it's easier to independently publish on the adult side and break in. I think certain categories, especially romance and thriller, those authors have much better access to their readers via indie publishing, where we're still not seeing it in the children's side as much. YA, middle grade, they don't really sell many ebooks. Um, Probably it has something to do with how many kids have access to readers and to e-readers and who controls the purchasing power. Um, so I think that on the children's side it's more essential than on the adult side to have an agent.
Yeah, I think I've heard that before as well. But have you ever had authors come from who initially were unagented and then got agents, or sort of came to you from non-traditional avenues?
Sure, I've had authors who became bestsellers with independently published books and then decided to try the traditional world. Um, and some of them have embraced traditional publishing. Some have gone back to independent publishing. It's been an interesting sort of path to follow over the past 5 years as things have shifted. I think it's kind of balancing out a little bit more right now, where we're seeing less people work in hybrid spaces and more work either entirely independently or entirely traditionally.
Okay, great. Let's take a question from the audience. Somebody is asking to speak about trans. Kathleen, this is sort of going out of order, but I want this to be interactive. So,
Yeah,
can you field that question for us?
sure. It's a very hard question to answer this week in particular.
Right.
I think everything is very much up in the air right now. I am hearing a lot from other agents, but also from editors, that they're looking for upbeat, escapist material. I think that will survive post-pandemic, but I do especially think that right now people are looking for probably. Sorry, someone is chopping down a tree directly outside my window, which I was not prepared for. um, but what I was sorry, I think we might see an uptick in paranormal again. I think people find it a lot of fun and want to get back to that space.
Paranormal.
I do too. It's really, paranormal is kind of where I started and where I kind of earned my stripes as an agent. So I would love nothing more than for all the vampires and witches and werewolves to come back. And I think that I think that it might be a fantastic moment. I sort of had inklings about it before we were in this moment.
Mhm.
I feel it even more strongly right now. I think that dystopian was already on its way out. I think people really don't want it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. But I think fun, upbeat. People definitely want rom-coms. That's something I'm hearing across the board and across young adult and adult age ranges. And contemporary seems to be doing really well in middle grade NYA. There's a bit of a glut of high fantasy, so we're sort of looking for other ways to maybe enter those spaces in escapist ways without being quite as full blown, wholly new world, that kind of epic fantasy. I think we might be stepping a little bit back from that at the moment. I see Dane has a question. How is African American fiction, or oops, I just scrolled
I
down.
know. You guys are really prolific
It's
with the
moving
questions. It's
fast.
awesome.
How is African American fiction or fiction involving people of color doing right now? I would say that I hope it's a very encouraging time for books by and about people of color. I think that the We Need Diverse Books team and movement has done incredible work advocating in the industry over the past few years.
Mhm.
As we see sort of trend pieces coming out, the work has not been completed. We are nowhere near where we need to be, but I do think there are some encouraging signs that the publishing community is trying to do better, and I understand that that needs to happen in a global way. We need to do more hiring of people of color within publishing. We need to have more
Right.
diverse editors and marketers and salespeople. That is a massive need in the industry. But I think more than ever before, representation is increasing as in terms of percentages of books that are being published. So some good work, not enough good work, but hopefully we're moving in the right direction, and we'll continue to push a little faster and a little harder.
Yeah, and I'll just give a big plug to the Las Musas organization, since that is what is sponsoring all of these webinars. It's a group of Latinx women and non-binary authors who have banded together to try and uplift our very varied voices in children's literature. So that group is specifically kid lit, young adult, middle grade, picture book. But diversity is needed throughout all genres at the moment. And then I just wanted to point out there was an earlier question which sort of dovetails with this, which is, this is a tricky one. This is a tricky subject.
Okay.
The question from Allison, can you please talk about who can write about what? Most specifically, white author writing primarily African-American wrongful conviction issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really big question, and a tricky one. I would say that I don't want I don't want to say that anyone is restricted by what they can write. I don't think that's artistically feasible or reasonable. I think that we are paying a lot more attention to, um, and and we're getting it wrong a lot as an industry. We're getting wrong who gets to tell what story, who is paid what to tell what story. If you want to look at the American Dirt situation, I think that is an incredibly recent publication that sort of shows a lot about how publishing hasn't gotten with the program yet. I don't think it's impossible for a white author to write about the experience of Mexican migrants. I think there were a lot of other problems with that book, especially. I mean, I haven't read it, but I know the marketing was hugely problematic, and how it and the author were packaged. I think that we're looking to be more responsible in all of the choices that we make, and that we're trying to make sure that the communities being written about have a voice in the publication process. But I'm not ever going to say, you have this ethnic background, so you can only write about people who share a similar background. It's not right, and it's not reasonable. I think we're pushing to
Yeah,
see more sort of own voices representation, because people will write about their own communities probably the most effectively. But there are no hard walls or locks on doors.
right.
It's just about trying to be more responsible and trying to be smarter.
Right. And yeah, and also sort of doing the right thing, I would add. I have to say, I met an amazing author, Mitali Perkins, whose website if you are an author who's not an author of color, but you're thinking of writing about either, somebody who has a different background than you, whether it's disability or religion or culture. Mitali has great pieces, and she comes at it from the perspective angle. I'm sorry, the privilege angle. So her point is that it's not, if you are a person who is in a position of privilege, you have to be aware of your own biases, and that might hamper your ability to effectively write about a character who doesn't share that privilege. And so, for instance, there's another question here about disability, illness, and you have to ask yourself the question: am I the right person to write that story? Can I do that story justice? And that's not to say that there isn't the endless bookshelf, because I think that that's also a great thing to think about, that there's room for everybody's stories out there. They have to be done well. They have to pass the gatekeepers of the agents and the editors and be read by readers and be embraced by them. But sometimes you just have to ask yourself that question: am I the right person to tell this story? So.
And to talk about it personally for a moment, as a gay man, I'm very conscious of reading books about gay men written by straight people, or books about gay men written by cis women. And a lot of the time, my feeling towards those books is they have every right to write them, but I'm not necessarily the reader for them. But then Rebecca Mackay's book, The Great Believers, came out, I want to say about 2 years ago. And she's a straight woman writing about the AIDS epidemic in Chicago in the 1980s. And when I first heard about it, I thought, well, there's really no reason that I need to read this book. But I read it, and it's probably my favorite book of the past 3 years. She did an unbelievable job. It felt accurate. It was sympathetic. It was smart. It was humane. It was brilliantly written. So even there, where I sort of, chafe at how many female-written male-male romances are coming out into the market right now, I am not going to say they can't be written, because there are those authors that surprise me and nail it and get it completely right. And I want that room to be there, even as I also want us to be better about interrogating who's telling what story and why.
Right. Yeah. But it's an ongoing discussion, and it's one that I'm glad that we're all having, and it seems like we're having it a lot. So that's reassuring. All right. So here I'm moving on to another one of my questions, and I'll get back to your questions, audience. What should a writer look for in an agent, and what does an agent look for in a writer?
I think in an agent, you want someone who mainly who has two things: who has the enthusiasm about your work and the experience or connections to sell your work. That's not to say always go with the most experienced agent. Sometimes someone who has a bigger list gets a little overwhelmed because they have the most authors and they might have less time for you, where a brand new agent might be able to bring scads of time to your book and
Mhm.
really be able to throw themselves at it in a way that is priceless. So I think you're looking for a blend. If you find someone who's super enthusiastic but doesn't have a lot of experience, you want to see where they're working, who they're working with, what connections their agency has,
Mhm.
how they're supported within that agency. And try to find out how serious they are and how much you can tell from a conversation whether it sounds like they're really in it for the long haul. And you won't necessarily get it right every time, but I think you should be asking those questions. With someone more experienced or who has a bigger client list, I think you can ask, how many people do you represent? Does that affect your response time? How quickly do you respond to emails? How quickly do you read drafts? I think those are all fair questions. And to plug my own Twitter page, if I'm at Jim McCarthy 528. I do have my pinned tweet is a list of questions that you can ask a prospective agent to help you find the right one. If any agent makes you feel uncomfortable for being pushy, for having a lot of questions, for wanting a lot of information, they're probably not the right person. Feel free to push because we don't have jobs unless we have you. All of our income is based on our clients, so that baseline respect has to be there. And in terms of what we're looking for in clients, I want super talented people who are respectful and kind and talented. I want people who stand up for themselves. I love a fighter. I love a determined author, um, and but also uh, someone who will call me out if I need to be called out, but who also respects my opinion when I share it. Because you will never have an agent who agrees with you about every decision you want to make.
Well, you kind of don't want that, right? I mean, you just don't want
Probably not.
somebody who just thinks that you're the best and everything that comes. I mean, I remember somebody said at one point that the agent is the person that's supposed to tell you you've got like something stuck on your teeth,
Right?
right? Like
Yeah.
not to let you go back out into like the room with all the people. There's supposed to be like, there's something on your teeth, take it off before you go out there.
Yeah, because if you just have someone who says yes to everything, who shops every project, who always tells you that you're right, they're probably not serving you very well because they're just going to sort of like flood the market with your material and send out everything as it is. And no one gets it right all the time. No author and no agent. So I think,
Or publishing houses for that matter.
and truly, so I think really the best agent client relationships are the ones where you can be contentious and friendly at the same time.
Right.
Be able to
Well,
really push each other.
yeah, and I think you mentioned respect, and I think that's actually important. You want to be respectful, um, because you're going to be working with this person hopefully for many, many years, and you want to be able to respect them, respect their judgment, but also, be kind to one another,
Yeah,
but also not
absolutely.
be afraid to ask questions too, because that would not be good either. And so I also shared with the group a list of questions that Myra Cuevas came up with that she's also going to share tomorrow on her webinar with her agent, that probably supplements what Jim is saying, what he has on his tweets, of sort of just some questions you might want to think about for that first conversation that you have with your agent. Okay, so now we've gotten a bunch of questions about the query letter, and actually, my next question was about the query letter, do's
Great.
and don'ts. And so we can start with one of these questions. It's sort of like, are there any technical things in writing either in the query or in the sample pages that immediately cause you to pass on the submission, and what grabs you in opening pages and query. It's sort of like the same idea. So first of all,
Yeah.
everybody knows what a query letter is. Maybe let's just say, like, a query letter is something that usually is sent by email, most commonly, I believe almost exclusively probably these days.
Just about, yeah.
Where you're basically introducing yourself to the agent. You're going to explain to the agent who you are, what your book is about, and why you think the agent would be a good fit for you and your project.
Yeah, so it's usually 3 to 4 paragraphs, pitching the book, and more than anything else, it's a cover letter like you would send for any job. You're trying to keep it as sort of neat, clean, and efficient as possible, keeping in mind that agents are probably seeing a few dozen of these every day. The most common things people get wrong that make me say no really quickly are misspelling my name, sending me books for categories I don't represent, or getting really gimmicky, that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, where people write in the voice of their main character, or they try to be sort of too aggressively friendly. It's great to say, I'm querying you specifically because I read this interview and it sounds like what you're looking for is what I do. It's very different to write to someone, and this happens to female agents a distressing amount, but people sort of talking about their appearances, saying they have like really friendly eyes. I see something
surprising.
Recoiling from that. It does happen more than you would expect. All I really ultimately want is a totally professional letter that says why you chose me. And again, it doesn't need to be that specific. It could just be, I know you represent this book, and I think mine fits is a similar genre. It can be, you tweeted saying your manuscript wish list included this, but why you're querying me specifically, and then 2 to 3 paragraphs about what your book is about. And you want to keep it general. You want to hit the big themes and the big arc of the novel, or the nonfiction if you're writing nonfiction. But it should read essentially like flap copy on a book, because its ultimate purpose is to do the exact same thing that
to draw you in
does. Yeah, you're trying to make me buy the book. Essentially, you're trying to make me, instead of spend $25 on a hardcover, you're asking me to invest 2 hours into reading your work and seeing if it's a fit for me. So my biggest pieces of advice for query letters are to keep it simple and straightforward, to not be gimmicky, and to trust the material. It's more straightforward than it seems. There are so many classes on how to do it. There's so many books about how to write them. I think not overthinking it is the hardest and yet most essential piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, and I have to say, I definitely overthought my query letters. And I was just looking back, I have hundreds of query letters, because for those of you who joined into the first webinar last week, I shared that my first manuscript was not the manuscript that landed me an agent. So I had hundreds with that first one, and then I had about maybe 35 with my second one, which is Water May, which I don't even have a copy here to like show for everybody. But I did share with the group another file, which is a list of resources that Myra and I compiled. And some of them were resources that I definitely use. So there's this website, I don't know if you've ever seen it, Jim, it's called Query Shark. It's very funny.
Yes.
If you're looking for some humor, I mean, it's a little bit easier to be funny from this side of like the bridge. But basically it's this website where this, I think it's a woman, but I don't know why I think it's a
It
woman.
is. It's Janet Reed, who's an
Okay.
agent at New Leaf Literary.
And she basically takes up, like, rips apart query letters. And it can be very humorous. And the agent will, like, point out, like, all the mistakes. But I have a document that I made. This is how crazy I am, that I made back in 2011. And I took notes. So I went through and it's a blog. So there are many, many query letters, so you can go through them all. And so I kept taking notes of specific takeaways from each query letter. And one of the things I'm going to summarize for you guys right now, because I wrote it down 3 different times, probably not realizing it was like point number 7, point number 21, and point number 44 were like the same, which is basically that one of the paragraphs has to be, who is the main character? What do they want / what choice do they face? And what are the consequences of this choice? Or who is trying to foil them? Like, who's their villain? So those are 3 points that have to be answered when you're sort of describing your book. Like, that's just a very easy way to do it. But I highly recommend that you guys if you are querying and you're looking, take a look at Query Shark. There's some other good resources, because I also dug up my old Excel spreadsheet, which had, let's see, 5 different tabs. I organized it by whether the agent was recommended to be my word of mouth, whether I got it on writersmarket.com, whether I got it from one of the SCBWI conferences, and which one, Publishers Marketplace. And then I have them all, like, alphabetized and color coded. I mean, I went a little crazy. Luckily for you guys, you don't have to do that, because there's this new website that I think this is the one called Query Tracker, which will track it all for you. So, and then there are other websites on there that allow you to search for agents by category, by genre. You can also, let's say you've read a book and you love this book and you say, hey, this book has some elements that my writing shares, or I admire it. And you can look up to see who that agent is. And you might want to then, if you're querying that agent, mention to the agent, I just read this book which you represented and I loved it because of this. Those are just some tips.
Yeah, I'm trying to scroll back through some of the questions that were when we were moving quickly, and some of the ones slip by. I see Paul asked, how much of an agent's manuscript wish list is determined by the market or their agency, or by their personal tastes? It seems like a lot of agents are asking for YA, and when I see memoir, it's often in the context of, please do not send them. I would say that my manuscript wish list is probably 50-50. It's things I want to read, for sure. But that is shaped by the market. It's, I might not want to see certain things because I've been deluged by them, because so many books about certain topics have come across my desk. So what I'm saying I want to see, I want to represent books that I want to read. But between signing something and publication, I'll read
you're going to read it a lot, right?
At least 3 versions of that novel. So I want something that I'm excited to go back to again and again. So I want all of them to be books that I want to read. And then ideally also I am looking for things that I can sell. So it's trying to find that middle ground. And there are some things, like I think domestic thrillers are doing really well on the adult side now. That's tree is down.
Was that the tree? I was going to say.
That was the tree.
Oh, that's very exciting.
Completely down. Sorry. Domestic thrillers are doing incredibly well right now. My coworker Sharon Pelletier does fantastic work with them. They're not my personal taste, so my manuscript wish list is never going to have them, in spite of the fact that they are doing very well. So it's a little bit of, it's partly what's working and partly very much what do I want.
Okay, here's another question. HD just asked, do you have an opinion on exclusive querying versus approaching an agents to query lists in a more traditional fashion?
Yeah, I would never do an exclusive query.
By exclusive query, you mean just querying one agent and waiting for that response. Is that what that
Yeah,
means?
some agents will, if they meet someone at a conference or if they meet someone online, they'll ask if they can have an exclusive look at something first. I don't, um, I don't like it. I don't respect it. I think it's kind of gross. I think all agents who are good agents know that you have a lot of people to go to. There are a lot of great agents out there. It's not fair to an author to ask you to wait 2 months per response. So I would very much say if someone asks you for an exclusive, I would say no. I would say I would rather not do that. I want to move forward with a full submission, but I'm happy to send it to you. I think that's true of queries, and I think it's true of manuscripts. And if they're not willing to consider it unless it's on an exclusive basis, I mean, it's so disrespectful that I would say chances are you just don't want to work with that person.
And also, if the agent is asking you for money along with
Oh
considering
yeah.
your work,
No,
that's a
it's
no-go,
an
right?
absolute no. Yeah, no agent should ever be paid in any way until they are commissioning money they're receiving because they have received payment from a publisher for your work. You should never be paying out of pocket, and you should never be paying anything other than commission.
Okay, good. Wanted to make sure we got that down. But that being said, so going back to the question about exclusive submission,
Mhm.
I would recommend to all of you out there, don't, like, let's say you have a list, let's say you compile a list of 100 agents that you think would be fabulous to work with, and you have your query letter ready. My advice would be, don't send it to all 100 all at one time. I would sort of batch it, because if it turns out that there's something um, about your query letter that throws people off, or something about the first three chapters or whatever it is that you're going to send, because people will ask you for samples of your writing. And I have to say, I did get good feedback from a couple of very nice souls who just gave me feedback. They didn't have to. All they had to do was say, no, thank you, it's not for me. But I was so green. I feel like this poor woman, I remember her, she's in Canada, and she wrote me like 3 pages. She's like, listen, these are all the problems that you have with your manuscript. Your premise is great, but you've got to do this and this. And I was like, thank you so much. It was so helpful. And so then I fixed all of those things. But if I had sent, but of course I did make that mistake. I think I sent to like 80 agents already. And so then my pool was smaller. So I would say do it in batches to reserve the ability to make changes and then send out to a fresh batch. That would be my advice.
Well, and I actually do the same thing, as you know, when I go on
Yes.
submission with a client's manuscript. I sign a project on, I edit it until I think it's ready, and I send it to about 10 to 15 editors that are my top tier of people who I would like to sell the book to. But I never go wider than that because I always want there to be a backup round in
Yeah.
case there's something that my client and I didn't see. And that can be anything. That can be a very similar book that's recently sold that editors know about that I won't have seen yet. It can be something that we might have seen but didn't know to expect. People might have a concern about the voice that never occurred to us. We want to make sure we're leaving as many avenues open for a potential yes as possible. So those first 15, I'm going to people that I want to work with, but I have a B list, and the B list is not just people I'm willing to work with, it's people I would still be happy to work with. So I think, move you want to move aggressively, but not so aggressively that you don't have a chance to go back.
Right.
And I have the example I keep using most now, because it was probably one of the most unusual situations in which I signed an author. Taylor K. Mejia queried me a few years ago. She sent a version of her novel, We Set the Dark on Fire, and there was something very special about it, but it didn't work. And I wrote back and turned it down, but told her why I was passing, what I liked about it, and what I didn't. She sent it back. I read it a second time. It still felt incredibly close,
Can I
but not
interrupt?
quite there.
Did you
Yeah.
tell her you would take it back if she
I
made
told
changes?
her, yes, if she
Because somebody asked the
revised.
question, if you get a no, does that mean you can never query again, or can you do it with a different project? Just sorry to
Oh,
interrupt your
sure.
story.
Yeah, well, there are different. I know there was also a question about how many versions of
Of no are there? Is there
no
like the
are
hard
there.
no, the
Yeah.
I really kind of liked it, but no, but
I have three rejection options. The first I call not for us, which is a form letter that only goes to people who have sent a query. The second is I call it a nice note. It's still a form letter, but it's addressed to the author for the project and leaves me a little wiggle room to add a sentence about something that I liked, or a reason I might be passing. And the third is the very nice note, which is personalized rejection. Um, and detailed feedback. And usually, if I'm sending that one, there's also an invitation to resend if the concerns I'm stating are addressed. So Taylor got that one, and she revised and she sent it back. It still wasn't there. I sent her another very nice note saying, "You're so close, but I still have concerns." She sent a third version of the novel back, and I had one of those moments when I read it where I suddenly had a crystal clear vision of exactly what the book needed editorially. But I thought it needed to start about 75 pages sooner than it did, and it needed to be two novels instead of one. And I thought, she'll never do this. This is an absurd amount of work to give someone. So I wrote and I said, you're probably going to think I'm nuts, but this is what I think. Um, it's more work than you likely want to do, you know, but there it is. And she wrote back to me in a very nervy email and said, if I promise you I'll do what you just suggested, will you sign me today? And I said yes.
oh, good for her.
Yeah,
She's a fellow Las Musas, by the way.
She is.
And her book is up there for you guys who want to put it in your cart.
Oh, fun. Yeah, and that book ended up getting 6-star reviews.
Yeah.
Incredible praise. And it's one of the books I'm proudest of because it was such an unusual journey, and because I feel like I had a lot to contribute editorially, but I also know that because of her ambition and nerve and willingness to really put herself out there, that she was able to kind of fight her way into the marketplace. So when I think about that book, I'm kind of proud of both of us.
Yeah, and it's also important for everybody out there to hear stories like this, that it's not always, we're not all like Stephanie Meyers, where like we wake up, we have this dream, we just grab a pen, we like quickly write it down, put it in the mailbox, and then we're getting a call from New York 2 weeks later saying we want to publish this and now you're going to be in the movies. And that's the, I think, the atypical way that things happen. Usually it takes work and perseverance, and just don't give up. Because it took me 5 years to get an agent.
Yeah, which is not a terribly unusual amount of time.
And to answer somebody else's question, so I actually queried Jim with my very first manuscript, which never got published and never got me an agent. And it was my second project and I don't even remember if Jim remembered that I'd queried you like 4 years before, right?
Before.
I was weird because my name is kind of unusual, that maybe people would be like, oh, it's that woman with a weird name again. But I slipped that under there.
Sometimes I notice certain names and go back and search to see if they've queried before, but most of the time I probably am not remembering.
Okay, so I had a question about submissions, how you prepare. But before that, do you want to talk a little bit about the contract? So when I say contract, there's actually two different types of contracts. There's the contract that an author has with an agent, and then there's going to be a contract for the book that's with the publisher, that's like the buying of the book. But do you want to talk quickly about the contract between the agent and an author? Like, how much variety is there in that sort of a thing, or is it usually just kind of boilerplate, like you just sign it? Like, should people be looking for certain things, or?
It's tough because I don't know those contracts as well. I know because I've been at the same agency since I was 19 years old. I
Right,
know,
you just know yours. You know
yeah,
your
I know ours
your contract.
aggressively
It's true. I
well.
only know yours also.
I
So
could probably write ours from scratch. Uh, but I think you're looking for some pretty standard things. You're looking for a 15% commission, um, 19 or 20 on foreign rights. Um, some people go up to 24 or 25 if they work with sub-rights agencies, which can be okay, but that should be clarified. If it's about, yeah, if foreign rights commissions are above 20%, you want to ask what the breakdown is. Because if they're working with a co-agent that charges 15% and they're still taking 10%, I think that's fair. Um, and then ours gives us a certain period of time to sell the book. Um, the boilerplate says 12 months. I am always willing to change that if anyone asks. I'll go down to 3 months. And it basically says that once we've sold the book, we can keep selling the subsidiary rights as long as the book is still in print. But you're not tied down to us forever. If you want a different agent after the first book, which happens, the agent-client relationship is incredibly close, and sometimes it's hard to get it right. So we like to leave room so that people don't feel like they're tied to us forever and have to go through some torturous process to leave. So really, after the first book, if you wanted to go with someone else, you could just go. And we would just keep what we've already sold, and you would be able to start fresh somewhere else. So I think that's probably how that language is phrased is probably the most important part. You want to know what your out clause is, how long you're tied to them, and
wait, what's the out clause? That's how long you're tied to them?
yeah, or how to leave if and when you
Ah,
want to.
okay.
So some people ask you for, 30 days written notice or something like that, which I think is reasonable. But you just want to be avoiding anything where, you know, all of your work is controlled by the same agent until, you've given them a 6-month window to wrap up all deals. Like something like that, I would say is sort of draconian and should be avoided.
Hmm.
I think you want a relationship with an agent who wants to work with you forever, but you also want an agreement that allows you to leave pretty easily. Because you never want to be working with someone if the only reason you're working together is that they won't let you go.
Right,
Um,
a piece of paper.
yeah, and Shannon just asked if the agent client out clause is a two-way street and if the agent gets an out as well. And yes, agents never have to keep working with you. If we sell a book, we should be doing all of the work for it. But if a working relationship just doesn't work out, yeah, there are times where agents will choose to split up with a client. I think the happiest example I have of that, a client of mine who I wasn't able to sell. I think we tried 2 books together, and I wasn't able to sell them. And then she wrote this pirate novel, and I hate pirate stories. I just have absolutely no interest. And I told her that. I told her, listen, I think this is well done, but I haven't been able to be successful on your behalf. You're writing in a genre I don't know anything about because I don't like to read. read it. So
Right.
probably it's best to look somewhere else. She's now a New York Times bestselling author, with books that I sort of set her free with because I was never going to be the right match.
Hmm.
Um, that's kind of the best case scenario. Sometimes, there are just situations where two people butt heads and clash and can't work together, but those are pretty rare.
Yeah, and the another bit of, I guess, clarification, which is something that I feel like I picked up like 4 or 5 years into the process. So if author writes book one with one agent, it sells, and then they end up getting another agent for book two, agent one always represents book one, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
until if it goes out of print or you get the rights back, then the rights all go back to you. But if I've sold your first book and it remains in print, then I'm still doing the work on the royalties and all of that on the first book until if and when it goes out of print or the rights revert.
Great. And then another quick question, film rights, but I think our film rights are usually specific to the actual book contract, right? The manuscript contract, not with, that's not like the agent author contract.
Well, it depends because film rights, again, different agents do it differently. You have sort of the big LA agencies that have literary departments, so ICM, William Morris, CAA, UTA. They all have literary departments, but are connected to entertainment departments, so they'll
Hmm.
work on your book rights and on your film rights all in one house. The only sort of smaller publisher or agency that does that, and they're not that small, is New Leaf, run by
Hmm.
Joe Volpe, who have an in-house film team. They do great work. Everybody else works with co-agents. So I have sort of the people I most trust and most uh, share interest with and know that our tastes align. Um, so I'll go to those agents in order to work together to try to sell the film rights because they have the producer contacts where I have the editor contacts. And that's still within the 15% commission. The co-agents I work with divide up the commission with me. We decide that's separate from my relationship with the client. Um, so that's usually how it works um, at most boutique agencies.
All right, great. We've got about 7 minutes left. I was going to ask about, we already talked about how you sort of your process of sending a manuscript on submission, and then sort of let's just quickly talk about what comes when you get an offer
Mm-hmm.
or maybe multiple offers, like what happens then?
So ideally, when we get an offer, that there are other people still considering. So I'll let everybody know that there's an offer on the table, and I want to hear by a certain date, usually 1 to 1.5 weeks away. The hope is that multiple people will offer, and we then get to go to auction, and people bid against each other, and the highest bid will win the book. Um, there are other ways it can be done. Sometimes, if someone reads something really quickly, an editor or a house might try to preempt a book. They'll put together a big offer and say they need to hear by the end of the day whether you're accepting that offer or whether you're going to hold off and go to auction. Um, and sometimes you just have the one offer. Sometimes other people might be a little bit interested, and you can sort of try to use that to
Leverage.
negotiate up,
Yeah.
yeah, as whatever leverage you can get. It's a little bit of a chess game, um,
But that's why we
and
have you, right? That's what agents
yeah,
do. They're really good at that.
it's why we're there and why. I love working at the agency I work at because we're not competitive between the agents. I think we're an agency of 15, and 9 of us have been there for 15 years or longer. So we just know each other so well that there's this real kind of communal energy that we share. So you're sort of running it by all of your coworkers and getting their advice and trying
Mhm.
to base your decisions on what you know of the house that's offering, what you know of the editor that's offering, who else has said what. It turns into just this really sort of intricate strategy of gamesmanship to see how much you can use what you have to get even more.
Right.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's one of the best parts of the job. I would say the best parts of the job are calling a first-time client or first-time author to say that their debut novel has sold or has an offer.
Yes, that was very exciting.
My second favorite is being able to call someone and tell them for the first time that they're a New York Times bestseller. And then my third favorite is negotiating. Negotiating is a blast. We all love it. We're all incredibly stressed out by it and run ragged by it, but not so secretly also thrilled.
Awesome. And just to jump back, everything that we were talking about in terms of leveraging, you can also do when you're querying an agent. So I feel like I meant to say this and then I kind of got sidetracked by something else. So if you have an author, if you have an offer from an agent to represent you, but you have your query letters out to 10 other agents, you can say, great, let me, ask your questions, have your dialogue, but give me a few weeks because I've also sent, the manuscript is out, or I've queried 10 other agents. And then you should be contacting those agents and letting them know, hey, I've received an offer of representation. Can you get back to me within 2 weeks? Something like that.
Yeah,
That's sort of
two
like
weeks
common
is
courtesy, right?
2 weeks is a really good standard, and you will find that nothing makes agents move faster than another
And
agent
knowing
ever
somebody else
having
wants it. I mean,
offered a
that's
representation.
human behavior, right? I mean, it works with my kids too, quite
Yeah,
honestly. Nobody
I've
wants to do
had
this thing unless somebody wants it, and then they're fighting over it.
yeah,
So,
um I signed a book from Pitch Wars where the author had 11 offers of representation, and
wow.
I wanted it more than I had wanted anything in a
Right.
very long time. Because
Must
we're
have.
all, it's really like the one thing that I think all agents have in common is an incredibly competitive spirit. We're people who work on commission, we're people who are trying to sell things for the most money that we can, and it just deep inside of us, like we're book lovers, but also we're incredibly competitive, vicious deal makers, hoping to
Yes.
win at all
Which
costs.
is why you want them on your side. You want them out there, like in the trenches, doing the battle for you, so you can do the writing of the book. But again, I had one last other question, which was even, when the manuscript is acquired, what comes next? And that, Jim has been fantastic in that realm also, just helping me figure out like what is normal from here to here, because especially if you're a first time author, or even if you're not a first time author but it's the first time you've been in that situation, the chances are that your agent has seen this situation before, and so they're exceptional resources. So I highly recommend them, and I highly recommend Jim. So I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to also share a file, um, how to query Jim if you are still in the query trenches, and to thank Jim and thank everybody who's tuned in. It's
Yeah,
a
can I
fabulous
answer one
showing.
last question?
Yeah,
I
go.
I see that David has asked it twice now, and it's a question I really like that a lot of people don't ask. And it's how critical is negotiating in advance? I personally wouldn't care about shooting for a high advance, knowing my book could be published in the end for something less, but I'm not sure if that's the right mindset for me to have. What are your thoughts on this part of the
Oh, that's a
process?
good question.
It is, and so few people ask it. I think everyone just wants an offer. They don't they don't really
Yeah.
know, they don't care. They're like, I just want a book in a bookstore. Um, Traditional thinking says that the higher the advance is, the more likely the publisher is to advertise your book, to market it, to promote it. And the idea is if they're that much more invested in your work, they're going to put that much more energy into making sure that your book works. It's not always the case. There are times where I'll look at certain publishers and think, you know, $100,000 from this publisher is the same as $50,000 from this other publisher, because some people well, whatever, I'll just say it. HarperCollins throws a ton of money at books that they then don't promote at all. Whereas other publishers, if you take someone like a really fantastic independent publisher like Algonquin, for them to offer $50,000 would be a lot of money, and you would really know they were entirely behind the book. Where Harper putting $100,000 on the table, you're like, it's a roll of the dice for them. It's News Corp's money. They don't really care what happens. So it's not just about getting the highest dollar amount. It's how much they're offering, but it's also who they are and what it means for them to be offering that. And that, again, is a conversation that I think you would and should have with your agent.
Right. And that's also the type of, I don't want to call it insider information, but it kind of is insider information. It's information that I personally would not have any access to, but your agent does. So that's why.
Indeed.
And so, Jim, just can you verbally say how to query you? Because a couple of people, I think, are having trouble finding the file.
Yeah, not a problem. You can email me at jmccarthy, JMCCARTHY, at Dystel, DYSTEL.com. Put a query letter in the body of an email, and then send 3 sample chapters. Those can either be in the body of the email or as an attachment. And send them along, and I'll happily dive in.
Great. So thank you again, everybody. And if you're interested, if you've liked this webinar, tune in for some more. Tomorrow, there's another Ask Agent. So you can hear another agent's perspective on a lot of the same questions. And it's important because, you know, we're all people, so we all have different perspectives. And also we have many more different types of webinars. We have a book club coming up. Myra and I are doing one for our 2 books. There's some webinars on sort of mental health issues represented in young adult. There's world building classes. There's a lot. So check out our website, and I hope you guys all stay safe and sanitized and engaged. Engage online.
Indeed.
And read books. Here's one if you need a total escape. So all right, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you
again,
everyone.
Jim.
Of course.
Bye.